right. Welcome all to the meeting of the Kent County Board of Commissioners. I will start this meeting with the roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Vice Chair Green.
Here.
Commissioners Antor.
Here.
Merchant.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Hildenbrand.
Here.
Ponstein. Burl.
Here.
Coleman. Breivy.
Here.
Teal.
Here.
Sparks.
Here.
McLeod.
Here.
Hennessy. Oliver King.
Here.
LeGrand.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Wooden.
Here.
Pakla.
Here.
Diaz. Bujak.
Present.
Chair Steck.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 18 members present, 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I will now call on Commissioner Burrow for our invocation this morning.
All right, thank you, Chair Stack. All right, today I looked at, kind of yesterday, you're kind of breezing through your day before, trying to figure out how you're going to do this. So just kind of going through different devotionals, different things that I kind of liked. I saw this one from Joyce Meyer that I thought was nice. And it says, "No day will seem ordinary if we are thankful for the gift God is giving us at the start of each day. An extraordinary attitude can quickly turn an ordinary day into an amazing adventure. Jesus said he came so that we might have and enjoy life. If we refuse to enjoy it, then it's no one's fault but our own." She goes, "I would like to suggest that you take responsibility for your joy and never give anyone else the job of keeping you happy. You can control what you do, but you cannot control what other people do. So you may be unhappy a lot of the time if you depend on them as your source of joy. The psalmist David said that he encouraged himself in the Lord, and if he can do it, then we can do it too." And this is the prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you today in humility and faith. We thank you for all you have given us and the many blessings in our lives. We ask you for your guidance and strength. Show us the way and fill us with courage and wisdom. Help us to remember your love and grace and be faithful in our service to you. Give us the patience and understanding to face life's challenges with grace. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the invocation. We'll now move to our next item, which is the special order of business, and we have a presentation from the Rapid with respect to the Transit Master Plan. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Privileged to be with you today. I'm Nick Monoyos, the Director of Planning at the Rapid. I've been there 23 years, so I started when I was 5. And so you learn a lot of things, a lot of relationships, highly involved in the community. Look forward to sharing with you today and especially answering some questions and having some discussion. So I'm going to throw a lot of things at you. There's a lot of, we're probably about 8 to 12 months into this. We're about halfway done. I just want to kind of shower you with a lot of information. Anything that piques your interest, we can flag to talk about a little bit more. Overall, just a general project overview we'll talk about today and kind of what our process is and a little bit of next steps. This is our existing system right now, 28 fixed routes within the 6 cities and a few contracts into adjacent townships providing the service that we have today. So overview, the who, what, when, where, and how, right? This is our 20-year vision. What do we need to establish in order to prepare for this horizon? Our study area consists of the entirety of Kent County, so it's outside of our 6-city service area in this outline here. It's the entirety of Kent County as well as some adjacent townships to the west in Ottawa County. In that, we've identified 34 different jurisdictional plans that is helping to inform the direction of this Transit Master Plan, as well as this TMP will help to inform some of those that are in their latter phases, as well as additional plans that are forthcoming. Kent County Mobility Study, one of those as well. So again, we want to make sure that we've got a strongly coherent and integrated set of regional alignment as we conclude this study. The structure, stakeholders, that's our North Star, driven by the large umbrella, which is the community. We've got a steering committee, we've got a technical advisory committee, and Mark Rambo is the designee from the county on that we meet monthly. Series of focus groups. Our two Rapid board-affiliated groups, the Planning and Technology Committee, which is a subset of our board, and our Rapid board that will approve the final plan. So we've got a lot of irons in the public input fire, and it's always great. There's always so much insight that we always gain from all of these groups. So to start, we just kind of dump the puzzle pieces out. We talk to our board, we talk to these groups, and what words come to your mind, what sentences, statements, and things like this. And primarily, aside from service and transportation, but partnership opportunities and funding. Funding was the biggest one, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So then we sat down with our board and our steering committee and established these 5 guiding principles. So community, again, the big umbrella. Absolutely imperative that we're reflective of the entire region. Growth, we know that we're a vibrant and exciting region. We need to grow along with that future that we're anticipating here. Convenience has come up more than any of these, I think, in realizing that the impact that transit has is not as convenient as someone driving a personal automobile. What could we do to make this more convenient? Internal workforce, that's just kind of internal structural dynamics to achieve the recommendations of the TMP, and as well as adaptability. How do we stay agile and nimble so that we're not reactive to these changes but can anticipate them coming forward? Quickly go through the status. We've completed some baseline assessments, existing and future conditions, market analysis, peer review. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Working on what the future options and scenarios, so looking at an array of options to kind of some buckets that we'll work on in the next couple of months. We'll talk a little bit about West Michigan Express, doing a corridor analysis. So beyond the study area that we looked at, adjacent counties, we're going to speak with those folks to identify where are there additional inter-county kind of nodes that could particularly be helpful with express services. Planning guidelines, policies, and performance measures. Internal, we talked about the fleet strategy, facilities, joint development. What could we do? What levers do we have to help improve development, public-private partnerships to ensure that we're building as sustainably as we can? Because the best transit planning is the best urban planning. And so how do we, and then the pièce de résistance, the financial piece, right? How are we going to fund this? And then we kind of package all that up into a final plan. So quickly, map on the left, existing conditions. Transit demand, so population and employment in that study area, largely concentrated within the 6 cities in our system area. Transit propensity on the right adds some variables, demographic, socioeconomic, that shows more of a proclivity to riding transit, again, mostly in the service area. But if we start looking at activity centers and potential growth as it relates to land use, we start to see these nodes kind of emerge outside of our 6 cities. Now we look at the future. So this is the growth projections for household on the left and employment on the right. And I think this goes without saying that we're anticipating so much more growth outside of the 6 cities in both household and employment. We know that housing is this first highest household cost. Transportation is number 2. As we're all aware of the affordability implications, affordability tends to move outward, which makes transportation costs higher, right? So it's this teeter-totter of cost impact. So what can we do to help satiate what we're anticipating the future to be? So looking at some market analysis, won't get into too much of the detail here, but the map on the right is Replica data. Replica is a newer platform which tracks cell phone movements. Even if your cell phone is off for geolocation, if it can receive a signal or send a cellular signal, it can track you like ants marching. But it's extremely helpful in determining the most cost-efficient services that we can provide in transportation planning. But because we're a pulse radial system right now, most trips, 9 times out of 10, you have to ride 2 sides of a triangle to get to where you're going, which is why transit trips are 2 to 3 times longer than other modes. What could we do to fix that? We're not seeing as much activity in and out of the downtown. More trips are coming from outside the 6 cities into downtown than trips coming from inside to the downtown. Why is that? What could we do to position ourselves to be as effective as possible? These are the things that we're looking at. Travel time by mode, again, transit 2 to 3 times longer. In a car and a bike, walking, you go directly where you want to go. Oftentimes, without a dense network of transit service, you've got to transfer a few times. That takes time. Stopping, letting people off, getting on, all takes time too. What can we do to improve and move that needle there? Again, some market assessment, looking at that map. So these are desire lines based on that replica data and based on the household and population, the propensity. Overall, and what we'll show, and this is mirrored by what we've heard from the public, is that service expansion, both frequency, time of day, and area, geography, are coming to the surface in terms of what the data is showing us and what the public wants. Service expansion and improvements there. West Michigan Express, we completed a feasibility and implementation plan. So we looked at the modeling. We're meeting with the task force next week that get together before the pandemic, led by Patrick Waterman, now Deputy City Manager of Wyoming. There's a lot of excitement around the corridor for this as well, so we're hopeful to continue to see that moving. Now talking about our peer analysis, so as part of the TMP, we wanted to look at how do we compare against agencies and regions that kind of look like us with operating budget, population, ridership, and so on. Here's a smattering of some of those agencies around the country. Overall, in all measures, we are much more cost efficient and cost effective than our peers. It's great to showcase this, but there's so much more we can do because we are very lean. We know anecdotally we've always been very lean, but now that we're seeing this peer comparison, we're glad to be cost efficient, but that also means that there's so much more that we need, and based on the demand that we're aware of from the data and the public, that's something we really need to address. So again, higher transit use per dollar spent and is more cost efficient at most measures. So it's passenger miles, cost per trip, cost per hour, fare box recovery. We're actually second or third with all these peers. So good takeaways to how we want to proceed. This is just overall ridership. The Rapid is the thick blue line. So pre-pandemic starting in 2013, pandemic hit, and we're tracking this. This is 2022, 23 data is coming out, just came out, I think. But everybody's kind of recovering at that same pace. But it's important to us to kind of use this as a litmus test to how we're faring. We also look at aspirational peers, some of the topics. We've heard from many communities and cities around the country, hey, Grand Rapids, you're doing great. Don't make the same mistake we did. Think about this stuff and invest in this now. So funding, transit-oriented development, some mode split tools, marketing, kind of how do we help resist the stigma that transit often is in communities our size? How do we marry that with affordable housing and successful models of expanding into the region? Looked at Ann Arbor, Indigo, Austin, Texas, LA, Minneapolis, and Seattle. Have a compendium of input that is extremely valuable that will be in the final transit master plan. Won't get into those details today. Public engagement, again, steering committee. We had a successful open house, series of focus groups. We've what we call the road show, which is we go to any area, agency, business, nonprofit, any organization that wants to hear about this and provide some input. So we've been doing that all through the fall months. And these are all the ingredients that we're starting to put together, right? Now we're identifying what the recipe is, and we're about to put things in the oven. And that's where we're going to come back in the spring to have another round of public input. But over 1,100 surveys throughout the fall. And what's primarily interesting, and again, this mirrors the data, more service, expanded frequency and hours. The top 5 in terms of the most important all requires additional funding. Okay, that's kind of a no-brainer usually. But what's I think interesting is out of the 1,100 surveys, 74% have access to a vehicle. 68% of those surveyed usually drive. Just under half ride the Rapid. 29% used to ride but no longer do. Why is that? What are the factors that contributed to that? And 12% never have used it. So while we're getting a strong cross-section that's representative of what our mode share is with this survey, there's still overwhelming support for additional funding that is recognized as a need, both, again, from the data and the public. Next steps, we're looking at opportunities, the sustainable funding. We talked a little bit about joint development and transit-oriented development, expansion improvements, some of these partnerships, and some innovative elements. And I think we've got a strong capability with a unified region that we can trailblaze and pioneer some ideas that'll be fruitful for our entire community. I forgot to mention too, Thriving is the title of our TMP, and there is a website, transitthriving.org, that has all of this information and more. So we will be putting everything together. We've got all the ingredients. We'll be baking some things out over the course of the next few months, coming back to the public in the spring for more input and reaction as we then use that to finish and package the entire TMP. I know that's a lot this morning, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. You did package a lot in that
Yeah.
10 minutes. All right, Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I was just curious, do you know what percentage of your total operating budget is covered under ride fees?
Good question. Ever since right now, it's close, it's close to about 10 to 12%. Prior to the pandemic, it was closer to between 25 and 30, depending on the month, depending on the year.
Do you have a-
fare box recovery.
Do you have a goal there, where you'd like to be as far as like 40%, 50%,
Yeah.
something like that? Or what?
So even now, we're higher, we're better, much better than average as it relates to our peers, right? Our goal is obviously to continue to move that. That could be through partnerships, contractual partnerships. We haven't adjusted fares in 8 years. Prior to that, it was another 8 years. We're sensitive to that, and we see an elasticity. If you raise fares, there's certain equity implications there, but if you raise fares, 10% fare increase results in a 4% fare decrease, right? So there's that kind of elasticity sweet spot that we have to think about. But I think it's how do we continue to hone in and refine our operating costs? But again, the data show we're extremely lean. There's hardly anywhere that we could cut to optimize efficiency. And so this is what we're struggling with right now. We want to push that fare box recovery as high as possible. How do we do that? Through marketing, encouraging more ridership, improved land use, stronger policies to create more sustainability.
Thank you. And I just want to, whenever I look at programs like this, I always look at the return on investment.
Yeah.
How you can put, how much is it costing per rider? Are our buses full? Which ones are full? Which ones aren't? Where can we do some tweaking to make sure we're as efficient? Can't answer that all right now, but that's something that
Sure.
I know taxpayers look at.
Absolutely.
What's our return?
Yep.
Is it worthwhile to continue to do this, or can we buy people cabs? It'll be
Sure.
cheaper. So that's just something, I think in the future, it'd be nice to see that return, kind of explain how we're
Yeah.
doing it.
It's a good point.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
point well taken, absolutely.
Commissioner Burrow.
Thank you, Chair Steck. Has there been discussions about how we move people around here in Kent County? To me, it gets, you see the big buses. I go around Metro Health a lot. They're on a nice mile loop they have, and
Yeah.
you see a lot of empty buses. You see them sitting there a long time. Again, I know the need to move people and get people to work and people to doctor's appointment. I do think that's important. But the big buses, what discussions maybe have taken place that, all right, how do we move folks around?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's how we choose to build ourselves to the future. If we continue to build around the scale and speed of the car, we'll have to rely on cars. But there are significant, economic, environmental, and social implications to solely building that way. As we grow and develop as a city, as a region, we can become more sustainable if we offer choice and other modes to make other modes easier. The Metro Health, that's the end of the line. So anytime you're at any end of the line, there's always going to be an empty bus because everybody's, off the bus. And some folks are getting on. Ridership, is a key factor, but it can be incentivized by, I think, smart growth policies, better land use. The size of the vehicle doesn't really have any weight on what the cost per hour is, whether it's a 40-foot bus or a 15-passenger van that costs per hour. There's a nominal difference. And I know the optics are strong in that too, right?
Yes,
And,
they
and, and, and part of what this is not a plan that's just going to look at our standard fleet of 40-foot buses. This is going to include microtransit. This is going to include micromobility. So any scale vehicle, we can also be innovative with, maybe there's a model that nobody's done yet. If we can think it through, which I think we can, I think we can be advantageous with how we need to move people around. People always need to move around, and it's extremely expensive to do that. And so how do we maintain equity with our entire community to offer people a choice?
Yeah, thank you.
Vice Chair Green?
Thank you, Chair Steck, and thank you, Nick, for all the information you put into a short period of time there. Thanks. A couple of questions. The survey, 29% of the folks, I think you said, were former riders.
Yeah.
Oh, I did write that down correctly. 12% never rode. To me, those are the two opportunity areas for you guys, right? That 29% in particular, because those are folks for whatever reason are not utilizing transit anymore. But I know that's just from your survey, but you know, I'd be curious to know, and I encourage you guys to do whatever you can to get more sample from that 12%, so we can grow that, so to understand. You know, I personally, I'll be candid, I've never really been a Rapid user. I've ridden the Rapid probably less than I can, or I probably count on both hands the number of times I have. It's also not servicing my community in a big way. So, I just would love to see more input on, you know, why are you not using it? Is it because it's not in your area? Is it because it's too long? It's too, you know, I think the convenience thing, as you mentioned, is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So that was more of a comment. The one other question I had for you, actually two, and I'm sorry, Chair, if you'll allow me. When you talk about better land use, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like from your perspective?
And that's tricky because that's dependent upon the geography of the jurisdiction, right? Suburban, rural communities, you know, unless it's extremely intensive, you know, how do we, if we design around the scale and speed of the human, so build buildings for people, not for cars, right? And so to some, that's very provocative, right? To others, empirically, it's demonstrated good return on public investment. As a city, and I'm on the Grand Rapids Steering Committee for their master plan as well, but especially as a city, how can we replicate best practices so that we can zone, we can build affordable housing, and not just affordable on all price points, on many corridors, so the reliance on a personal vehicle doesn't have to be the default go-to. That's very difficult to do in rural communities, nor should it be, right? I mean, that's the identity in that definition of rural. If we grow smarter, we can preserve more agricultural lands, right? And again, this is 20, 30, 40 years ago, this was just theoretical academics, you know. There is pragmatic empirical data that show the overall benefit to everything, to public health, economic health, environmental health, by being more deliberate about building around the scale and speed of people and not default, the primary input is the car.
Yeah,
I could get into this for
No, yeah. and I find it very fascinating too. And just a quick follow up, Chair. And that I find that all that very interesting. I could go on and on too, but the other one thing I wanted to touch on while you're here, can you speak briefly about the I guess it's a pilot, the airport thing where you're taking kind of last mile. I heard about that you have vehicles that can take folks from the last stop
yes.
to. I'm interested in that because I live in Plainfield Township in Northview, so there's service to the Meijer near my house, but folks are not really going to be interested. We're so close to a lot of the destinations. I had a 12-minute car ride from downtown. So anyway, if you could speak to that, it's interesting because it's similar to where I am.
Yeah, so these gray areas in the northwest corner there in Walker and then the southeast by the airport in Kentwood, those are on-demand zones. Similar to Uber, Lyft, you summon a vehicle. It's a 15-passenger, 80-accessible van that picks you up. It's called Rapid Connect. That's how it's branded. Picks you up just like Uber or Lyft, but your origin and destination have to be within that zone. There's one vehicle per zone, and the whole idea is, again, first mile, last mile. There's significant, these are, aside from downtown, these have the strongest employment clusters in the entire region. And so with traditionally large industrial footprints, it's very difficult to serve with fixed route, although the employers have consistently advocated for more transit for their employees. This smaller vehicle allows that agility and movement through some of these large parcel industrial areas to provide that service to connect to fixed route. Same fare as fixed route. It's essentially just another appendage. So we have Kentwood Station at Woodland Mall that we've got 5 other fixed routes converged to. Rapid Connect is there as well. That's where you pick it up and it takes you to your place of employment. So ridership has consistently grown throughout the past couple of years. And the hope is, what could we use this pilot model to expand even areas within our system, first mile, last mile, but outside of the system too, if it's wanted, right?
Thank you, and
Yeah.
thanks, Chair, for the leeway. Appreciate it, Nick.
Absolutely. Commissioner Pecla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick, thanks for being here. Great information for all of us. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the scope of the Transit Master Plan. In particular, I'm wondering about some of those things that impact our transit system, like the people or our environmental actions that could or couldn't be included in part of this conversation.
Good question. You know, to get consistency and continuity with inputs to address that, so we have a technical advisory committee meeting, I think, right now, monthly. Consistently, we ask every member, and those are jurisdictional staff, transportation, planning, engineering, and so on, to bring to the table any of those inputs that can help guide us, right? So every step of the way, we want to make any course corrections that are needed based on any of those inputs, because things change, right? When we developed the scope of work to when we got the consultant team on board, the environment changes constantly. That's why we rely on the project team, the consultant team, our technical advisory committee, the steering committee, these 34 jurisdictional plans and developments that are happening outside of that, all are also changing, and it's an organic mass. How do we pluck and pull from this organism, this amoeba that's constantly changing? That's tricky. I think if I could accurately answer your question, I could write a book and retire. But I hear what you're getting at, and I think, you know, we constantly have to keep our, you know, lenses calibrated to ensure that we're absorbing any input to that as possible. I know that's kind of a ambiguous answer, but the process, I think, is relatively ambiguous at the same time.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So what I'm thinking along part of these lines is, it is a bigger impact if multiple entities within a municipality or within a region are advocating for similar things, right? So for instance, the electrification of the bus system is a really expensive and very difficult thing to do. If just the Rapid is advocating for that, or just the county is advocating for that, right, then that's a difficult prospect. But if we have alignment and a coordinated campaign of some sort, right, as it relates to strategic planning, then we start to see alignment there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's something to be said about, you know, as we want to get, especially to this gentleman, Mr. Green, you know, your thoughts on who are the people that are not riding or who used to ride. You know, I think what's important is we're not trying to sell people to ride. At least recognize the value of supporting transit in what it can do and be a driving force for a stronger, sustainable economy, environment, you know, and minimize social disparities as well. So even if nobody's ever going to ride it, that's great, that's fine. And in a lot of cases, you shouldn't, because it's not convenient for you, or you have travel patterns that are elsewhere. Understanding why it's important for those that rely on it. Let's build buildings instead of parking lots, right? There's opportunity cost for every square foot of parking that we build comes at a cost that we're not capturing economically through jobs and commerce, right? And anyway, that list can go on, but points definitely well taken. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Stack. Nick, thanks for being here today. Your
Thank you.
last statement leading into one of my 2 questions, and that's about parking. We had a room here filled with people who feel that there was no more need for parking at one of our largest attractions within the county. I know the zoo has talked a lot about, you know, reconfiguring it to get another underserved population within your boundaries, the inner city, that very few do get out to the zoo, and we've got the, you know, the park just down the road also. Has there been any thought of reconfiguring the system to make it more easy for people to take transit instead of driving to the zoo and then parking?
Yeah, good question. You know, and I think one point I'll bring up is that we've got our Laker Line BRT, which stops at the zoo, and it runs every 10 minutes and 15 minutes on the weekends. So how do we connect to that is the question. So even though there's a highly frequent 60-foot-long accordion bus BRT that stops at the corner of Fulton Valley every 10 minutes most of the day and 15 minutes on the weekends, if the connection to that is infrequent, if there's only 30-minute frequency or 60-minute frequency, especially maybe later on in the evenings or on the weekend, just because there's frequency on the alignment adjacent to the zoo doesn't mean anything if you can't connect there, right? We have the same conversation with high-speed rail. Everybody loves the idea of high-speed rail, but once I get dropped off somewhere, if it's gonna take me forever to get to where I need to go, that's 3, 4, 5 miles away, might as well drive. So the connectivity piece, I think, is extremely important for that, which the stronger connections you have, the more frequency you have, the more convenient it will be, and then it will make that choice that much easier, right? We hear that from folks that never ride except for Art Prize or festival or a concert downtown. I'm coming in from East Grand Rapids. Why do I want to battle the parking and the headache? I could just take that. And so it doesn't have to be used all the time. It could be used infrequently, but that connection's got to be there.
Okay, then my second question, a few years back, when these rapid lines were being considered, we had a millage to do the Silver Line. And a lot of things were said of what the benefits would have been.
Yeah.
Housing, business, economic development.
Yeah.
Have we take a look back and study what the outcomes we thought would be and what really happened?
Yeah, good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So when we were developing the thinking with the alternatives analysis for the Silver Line, we saw nationwide that, oh, look, this is the kind of thing that happens with BRT with enhanced modes. The problem is there's a recipe to follow. There has to be intentionality behind that. We've got to get the bankers, the developers, the small businesses, all of these people to sit at the table. What we realized our mistake is we said, okay, great, we've got the funding from the feds and the state to build this. The problem is everybody was just waiting and watching to see, well, when is all this stuff going to happen, right? Like there's magic pixie dust that's just going to, fertilize the economic growth there. That never happened. We received a few years ago an FTA, Federal Transit Administration grant for a pilot program study for transit-oriented development. We named that study Division United, and that's on our website too. You can Google that. Division United was a year-and-a-half-long intentional study to evaluate and analyze the recipe, if you will, to stimulate growth without displacement, right? So how do we build growth for the benefit of the existing community? It's a thick book this big. I've got a lot of copies, yes. There was a lot of intentionality to design what needs to happen. And so Kentwood, Wyoming and Grand Rapids were involved in that. Developers were around the table. Getting bankers to be at the steering committee table, to sit next to grassroots neighborhood organizers, because the idea is to build and develop, but the bankers have been saying, well, I'd love the idea, but if you build that over here, it minimizes our risk, as opposed to down there where the demographics the pro formas don't pan out. So how can we switch some things around to welcome that so that the underwriters and the bankers, bless you, are more supportive than they've historically been, if that makes sense, yeah. Yep.
Commissioner Merchant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here. You've touched on it slightly with a few of the other questions that have been asked, but I'm just curious, could you give us a breakdown of your current makeup for your funding sources? And then I know you're also in kind of the middle of the process, so it's a bit of a loaded question, but you keep talking about additional funding sources. What are those avenues that you're exploring?
Good question. So right now, in the toolbox, we have 3 primary tools in our revenue toolbox. So pie chart, it's property taxes, which we've got a 1.47 mill rate for the 6 cities. The other big chunk is state operating assistance. So right now, it's been Every year it changes. It's overall, the trend line is going down, and that's close to 30, it's between 30, fluctuates a few percentages around 30%, but it has been slowly shaving. And then fares. Those are our primary revenue sources. The toolbox that exists nationwide for the tools that exist, there's probably 30 or 40, especially these peers, not only our benchmark peers, but aspirational peers, that have a much more diverse array. One of the biggest, the most popular ones is sales tax. Bigger metropolitan areas that are much more, I guess, aggressively minded when it comes to funding this. Sales tax is a big one. Our state constitution does not allow for transit agencies right now to levy, to go for referendum for sales tax capture. Minneapolis, as an example, 74% of its revenue comes from motor vehicle sales tax. Wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it. What would that mean if we, so it's looking at alternatives, not necessarily advocating for them, but let's at least evaluate them, because property taxes, state operating assistance, we know is kind of going down. As our urban areas in the state grow their transit authorities based on local referendum, the pot of money at the state doesn't get any bigger, it just gets spread out thinner. We're seeing that. Property tax revenues and taxable value is not increasing to a point where our operating expenses are. So when our operating expenses have a steeper slope than the revenue generated by these traditional mechanisms, oops, right? That's an interesting problem to try to fix. That's one of our biggest struggles. Hope that answers the question.
Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very, nice to see you again.
You too.
I'm very intrigued by the express bus idea to Holland. And it seems to me like that really is something that people could get very interested in.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you see any possibility for more routes like destination routes. And as someone who lives in the middle of Grand Rapids, I would love to see a regular bus to the airport, because I get tired of paying for parking or begging someone to drive me there, or whatever it comes down to. And the thought of an airport loop is just, you know.
Good. No, I'm glad you brought that up. So this is, as a pilot program, the state budget office has already established interest in funding this on a pilot level. Only 5 or 6 trips a day. The nodes would be Hudsonville, Zeeland, and Holland. Now, the idea is strong. Part of the issue is without the supplemental first mile, last mile, are there parking lots here? Are they well lit? Is there security cameras? Is there the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker to incentivize, like, hey, I can park here and get a coffee and a newspaper and sit and wait, and here's a real-time arrival sign that says, that's great. So it goes beyond much more than just a line on a map and put the buses out on the street, and so there's a lot more to that recipe that needs to get there. But I think this could be scalable other areas around the region. GVMC last year just concluded an airport access study in which we looked at 2 examples for a shuttle. What we've seen in the past is that either A, if you're a business traveler, you've got expense accounts, and whether or not you park in the lot or take an Uber or rent a car, I just want to get to my destination. The flip side of that coin, B, and these are polarized examples, but a family packing up to go on vacation with all of their bags, they don't want to get on a bus with all of their bags and get, you know what I mean? It's, if I'm spending $10,000 on vacation, what's another $100 to park or to get? So how do we capture that in the middle? The point is very well taken. Who is the market for that, and where does that need to be? We're still, and that's going to be, we'll have some options there too.
And then kind of a similar question is, I'm thinking of Millennium Park, which, although it's very close to the city, is not so easy to get to. And is there ever any thought about seasonal transportation? Because if we ran something seasonally, that would allow people in the city better access to Millennium. I mean, I think that would be a big one, but I don't know how that fits in your planning.
No, good point. And I think, with the amount of funding we have, these are the number of revenue hours you have to spend and allocate on an annual basis. Without more funding, if we were to implement something like that, where do we cut from to offer service there? We did a pilot when Millennium Park opened. We did a pilot route in the evening, afternoons and weekends, minimal ridership. People, and again, when you want to go to the beach or play in the sand, coming onto a bus with a wet towel and stuff, that's a tough market to capture. I think there's better ways maybe to think through it. And where's that frequency point, right? If it's every hour, it's tough for people to rely on that, right? Because, oh, what if I miss it? What if something happens? I'm stuck for an hour. Well, the more frequency, every bus you add to that link doubles the cost. So of course, you can become more of a reliant transit user. If there was 10-minute frequency, oh, no problem, of course I can use that, so I can come and go as I need to. Very expensive. What's the ridership? What's the return? And so we monitor that very diligently on a daily basis, where our ridership is. We've got standard deviation formulas to make sure that we're putting the best service where it's going to have the best outcomes in terms of ridership and cost efficiency. So again, I have a lot of long-winded answers, so thank you for your patience.
Well, I have a lot of long-winded questions, and I just have a very short one now. But one thing I didn't really hear you address here is, and I'm sure you've thought about it and analyzed it, but how much is like people's familiarity or lack of familiarity an issue in their use of it? I mean, I'm a public transit enthusiast, and when I'm in a bigger city and I really want to explore it, I like to use it. But even for me, I'm like, oh, I got to figure this out, you know? And I know that's a factor for people. So how are you analyzing that?
That is a big factor. So we're hearing a lot of that, a lot of the survey input. We also have an ideas wall and an interactive mapping exercise on our website as well. We're hearing a lot of that. So a lot of the qualitative inputs largely are around that. How can we market it better? There's, it's, as you've been in the industry, as long as I have, and with that familiarity, sometimes I'm just like, oh, that's right. People don't know that you pull a cord to get off. They look at a schedule book and they see the time points. Is that the only place that the bus stops? Oh, yeah, I can see that you would think that. So I think, how can we be much more aggressive with a campaign to say, we want you to be aware of how it works, how to ride it, even if you never do, that's fine. But again, we want to promote choice. We want to promote that you've got other students under 16, you've got freedom. Elderly, that you no longer drive, you've got freedom to go where you want to go. It's a cost savings, for folks. So you bring up a good point. It is addressed and it has been documented. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, Commissioner LeGrand, some of us have solved that problem by building their house across the street from Millennium Park. No, it's first come, last served. Commissioner Oliver King. I'm sorry, Commissioner Baker, did you have your hand?
His hand was up before.
It was a real subtle hand raise, so I missed it. But Commissioner Baker, I know you were first.
Yeah, actually, a lot of these questions have been answered and new questions have arisen in this conversation. I know it's probably much more complicated. My question is how you're relating it. It sounds like you've already talked about it because you talked about your involvement in the Grand Rapids master planning process. Mm-hmm. I was at a community meeting recently about the zoning changes, potential zoning changes, and there were two kind of contradictory points. Where are we going to park? Mm-hmm. But we don't want places coming in that require transit instead of parking. And so the zoning problems will be, and to some extent, it's a cultural change. But yeah. I do want to agree with Commissioner LeGrand. I do use transit in nearly every city I visit except Grand Rapids, and right. Part of it is a communication issue. I just don't know. Mm-hmm. My kids used to know when they were in high school how to use it because they didn't have a car, but now they use other modes. So a communication issue is true, and I think that even goes with this conversation with the zoning and the master planning, is that we have a culture mm-hmm. that doesn't understand it, but I haven't seen the changes in the transit system to communicate that. Sure. When I'm in Chicago, I know where every bus stop is, and I can learn how to use it fairly easily, but here I'm not sure where I'm going when I get on a bus.
Understood. And we can do better, and that has been addressed. And the great news is, with this expansive outreach that we're doing, we're hearing so many things that we can implement tomorrow. that we could start working on that now. That doesn't require funding, right? That just requires a new way of looking at it. Different focus groups that maybe have never ridden and never will, but like, to your point, and to what I'm hearing too, it's just, what are some things we could be blinded by because we're familiar with it, But, yeah. So we are addressing that, and point well taken, we can do better, and we will, yeah.
Now, Commissioner Hallery-King.
Thank you. So maybe I'm a little off here. Can you go back to the survey?
Yeah.
Because I see where you talk about transit versus cars, but I would also think it would include, I go by, most people, they would take an Uber or call a Lyft
Yeah.
before they would even think about.
Sure.
So where does that fit into
Yeah.
this survey?
Good question. I think everyone's own economic situation gives them a sensibility for where their fulcrum is in terms of convenience versus cost. Some people, if it saves me 10 minutes, I'll pay $10 for, that Uber ride. And
Right.
Uber's still not 100% paid for, right? It's subsidized. You're not paying the real cost. The rider's not paying the real cost of that trip. No transit agency in the country is not subsidized, right? How do we optimize the convenience for people? Where is that sweet spot of making travel times less on transit to make it more convenient at a price point that's tolerable to provide a level of service where it's needed the most based on those color-coded maps? There always are going to be people that I'm going to drive no matter where I need to go in the city, even if it's, a mile away, I'm going to get in my car and drive. That's fine. If we grow in the most appropriate and sustainable direction, we have a future where that's going to be extremely expensive and difficult. We have very cheap parking, comparatively speaking, and very readily available parking. The cultural question is, how far do we want to walk from our parking, right? And I think that's kind of a battle with these zoning considerations and, these land use considerations is, we know the data and the impact that smart growth has where we cannot prioritize putting cars. Yeah.
Can I do a follow-up, another question?
Yes.
Okay. My second question, do you do any kind of education about the transit system, like in high schools?
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I was in high school.
Yeah.
They would come in and say, let's make sure you know the bus routes, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Do you do any of that?
Good
here
question.
in
Yeah,
Newfield?
we do have travel trainers. We've got an
Okay, travel
external relations team to schools, to employment centers, to, various large footprint agencies, that would set up a table and attend at lunchrooms and break rooms to help kind of train and things like that. Again, I think we can do better.
Do you also do that with the disabled?
Yes, yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the key findings map that has the trips by all modes. Yeah, that one. And you were kind of referencing, and you can now see very clearly why the microtransit regions were developed. But when you were talking about this, you were also bringing up our radial system and potentially reevaluating that. When I look at this, and I also look at the ridership decrease and how we align with our peers, do we know how many of those peers also have a radial mapping system?
Good question. Most of them somewhat. Some of them don't necessarily have a central station like we do. They kind of converge in the downtown with stops kind of on adjacent streets and so on. Their travel patterns could be different, right? And so it's apples and oranges. Similar route structure, route length. We've got a lot higher density per square mile than those other folks, those other peers do. Some ideas that are kind of coming out of this on an early stage, and as you can see from this map, and these are cell phone movements, there's about 5 to 6 times more volume of travel patterns between like the Calvin Woodland area and Gaines Township than there is coming in and out of downtown. This didn't used to be the case, right? Prior to the pandemic, there was much more of weight, center of gravity into the downtown as it relates to that proportion of travel patterns. So we've got a pulse radial system that mostly converged into our downtown central station. What would it look like if there could be satellite hubs that aren't necessarily all going downtown, but kind of a network of smaller hubs. Is that what it could look like? A grid system would be great, but you've got to have extremely high frequency, to make the transferability and the connectivity desirable, right? But yeah, good question though. Yeah.
That's helpful to know, just because, as I was looking at it, I wondered how much of the ridership decrease has also coincided with the vacancy rate of downtown commercial properties and downtown office buildings,
Yeah.
right? In the post-pandemic environment we're in. And given that so much of our current system is built to get people downtown either for entertainment or for employment, that could be contributing to that ridership decrease.
Yeah.
And then my other question, and just talking about funding stream, I know some municipalities in other states utilize some kind of value capture or TIF to help pay for transit, given that there is it's verified that infrastructure of all kinds, but certainly transit, also increases the value of properties alongside it. Has that, I know TIF is sometimes a bad word to say in the county commission rostrum, but is that something that has been discussed?
It will be. It's on the menu. That financial piece is upcoming over the next couple of months. So again, flipping over every stone, looking at every possible tool, and there will be pros and cons, right? There will be something that won't really generate anything, or things that might not be politically viable, and that's fine. We just want to show our due diligence, and we just want to look at everything and let the community decide how we want to proceed. But it's interesting, nationwide too, vehicle miles traveled are significantly reducing and continue to since the pandemic. People are just not moving around as much for a variety of factors. And so that's where we see nationwide, some fiscal hurdles that we have to, operating costs continue to go up, but the revenue streams don't.
Yeah.
What does that mean, especially the future of the industry? Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just be honest that I'm pretty pessimistic about the Rapid, and maybe you can help me be less pessimistic. But
I'll do my best.
My pessimism comes from, this problem of the last mile and the network and everything has always been the case. A little over a decade ago, I rode the Rapid every single day, and part of the reason was because I was a 2-block walk from Line 7 at the time, and it got me 2 blocks to my office building downtown, and it was very convenient. And so, the last mile problem was still a problem, back then, and even more so now as the patterns of people moving around have changed. So I also drive significantly through the kind of 28th Street and Division corridor, and there's kind of the 2 major bus lines there, and the in this era where lots of people, I think as Commissioner Oliver King mentioned, this Uber and Lyft expectation of point-to-point travel. Now, I have a lot of kids, but I can tell you that nearly 100% of the time, and I drive by hundreds of buses, the Silver Line there that goes up, nearly 100% of the time, my van has more people in it than the bus.
Yeah.
It's got
Not a fair comparison.
It's got. So, and I understand you mentioned before the costs are really not about the size of the vehicle. It's more about the driver cost, which would be the same in a smaller vehicle. But there is something like as I drive by and I just see like 3 people in a 60-foot bus on the Silver Line, the kind of environmental impact of that bus chugging along with only 3 people is not great.
Right.
And so that, and then I know we do have transit system of point to point, that when people really need that point to point, especially like our senior citizens, some of the funding through the senior millage, those with disabilities that need to make it to doctor's appointments. So we've got like the like the Ride Link system, and I know the Rapid still participates in that with buses, but that's like a point-to-point system that I think the Rapid, dropped operating the Ride Link and it had to transfer. So I'm just, seeing these factors, some like in the community and some like the decision-making of the Rapid that seems to fit with a strategy that looks to me like it'll just end up, perpetuating the problem we've got where we end up with a 60-foot bus that only has 3 or 4 people on it most of the time, which to me seems like a very poor allocation of resources. So that's where my pessimism is coming from.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any optimism for me.
No, I do, no, and I hear what you're saying, and, that's a strong consideration to kind of balance, because what we know is that if you put higher service levels, more people will ride, because it is more convenience based on the time that you need to go, and when you have lower frequencies, people tend to ride less. There are less riders on board a vehicle when it's closer to a terminus. We know that. We know ridership isn't once what it used to be. How do we identify what we need to do to rectify that, right? And I know the optics of seeing a vehicle empty, just like my optics of seeing highway lanes empty most of the time, just because there's only 20 minutes of the day where it's busy, so we spend, $100 million to widen it. Same kind of thinking, right? Why are we doing that? If we rethought things, how do we keep that sustainability in mind to know that, hey, you know what, if there is only 3 or 4 people, if we build buildings closer to where people need to go, transit-oriented development, right? Joint development, public-private partnership, and are strategic about, because the best transit planning is the best land use planning, the best city planning. So if we can start building nodes that are closer to the scale and speed of people, build more buildings, stronger tax base, we start seeing more of these people on board the bus, because it's easier to get places than it is to find a parking spot. Laker Line is a great example of that convenience, right? I want to be dropped off right in the heart of campus instead of parking a quarter mile away in the surface lot, especially in the middle of the winter. Wow, that's great. Well, of course, because you go to where the buildings are. And we have a lot of communities where there's not a lot of buildings. There's a lot of room for cars, not a lot of room for buildings. So I think on a macro scale, I think there's a good way that we can all synergize to be as sustainable as possible with all the resources that we have. I don't know if that's more optimism, but hope.
Well, we appointed Commissioner Coleman to the Mobility
Great.
Steering
Nice.
Committee, so you'll give him plenty of opportunity to develop his optimism. All right, anyone else? If not, thank you so much for your presentation this morning, Nick.
No,
Obviously,
thank you
this is
all.
a huge conversation that we probably could go for hours yet if we allotted the time, but perhaps next time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate all of your input.
All right, let's move to the next item, which is public comment. This is the first opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone here that wishes to address the commission on agenda items only, and I'm watching because there's only 2 items on the agenda, please do so now.
May I address the 0 to 5 issue?
That is not on the agenda for today.
That's not under item 7B?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah, that is not ready by 5.
Okay.
Good try, though.
I'll catch you later.
Yeah. All right. If nothing else, we'll move to the consent agenda, item number 7, and I will call on Commissioner Burrow.
I'm not even ready for this one. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Steck. I would ask that we move the consent agenda of today's day.
Support. Is supported by Commissioner Coleman, I believe. Questions or comments on this? If not, it is a roll call. Madam Clerk.
On the motion to adopt the consent agenda, Vice Chair Green.
Yes.
Commissioners Antor. Merchant. DeBoer. Hildenbrand.
Yes.
Ponstein. Burl.
Yes.
Coleman.
Yes.
Brevy.
Yes.
Teal. Sparks. McLeod.
Yes.
Hennessy. Oliver King. LeGrand.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Wooden.
Yes.
Pakla.
Yes.
Diaz. Bujak.
Yes.
Chair Stack.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 19 yeas, 0 nays. The motion passes. The consent agenda is adopted.
Thank you. We'll move to item 8A, and I will call on Commissioner Oliver King.
Thank you, Chair Stack. I move for the approval for today's date of property development rights, grants, and contributions for the Bradford Anderson property brought to us by the Administrator's Office.
Is there support? Supported by Commissioner Merchant. Questions or comments on this? Commissioner Merchant.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have quick, 2 questions for kind of both of the resolutions. First, I might have missed it, but I'm just curious where the 2 properties are located. And then my second question goes along with, I think, the first resolution, which was, it looks like one of the families dropped out of the program. How often does that happen, and what are some of the reasons for why that might happen this late in the process?
Great. So thank you for the
Matt Channing,
questions.
if you will go ahead and respond.
I will, sir. So the 2 properties are in Sparta Township on Peach Ridge. They're within a mile of each other. And they both have properties already in the program, so they're very familiar with it. Second question, how often does it happen? In the 4 years I've been doing this, it hasn't happened at all. But it is a voluntary program, and we're not beholden to anyone. The contract isn't binding in any sort of way until the easement is signed. So we give them full power to walk away whenever they can.
All right, any questions, comments? I see, Commissioner DeBoer.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there's no Kent County funds. I'm usually against PDR, but in this situation, I will be voting for it.
Thank you. If there's no one else, this is a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion to adopt Resolution 21, Vice Chair Green.
Yes.
Commissioners Antor. Merchant. DeBoer. Hildenbrand. Ponstein. Burl.
No.
Coleman.
No.
Brevy.
Yes.
Teal. Sparks. McLeod.
Yes.
Hennessy. Oliver King. LeGrand. Baker. Wooden.
Yes.
Pakla.
Yes.
Diaz. Bujak. Chair Steck.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 17 yeas, 2 nays. The motion passes. Resolution 21 is adopted.
Thank you. We'll now call upon Commissioner Oliver King for the next resolution.
Thank you again, Chair Stack. I move for the adoption for today's date of Resolution 22, property development rights, grants and contribution for the Betts and Kingsbury property brought to us by the Administrator's Office.
Is there support? Support. Supported by Commissioner Sparks. Questions or comments? I see none. Madam Clerk, this is a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion to adopt Resolution 22, Vice Chair Green.
Yes.
Commissioners Antor. Merchant. DeBoer. Hildenbrand. Ponstein. Burl.
No.
Coleman. Brevy.
Yes.
Teal. Sparks. McLeod.
Yes.
Hennessy. Oliver King. LeGrand. Baker. Wooden.
Yes.
Pakla.
Yes.
Diaz. Bujak. Chair Stuck.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 17 yeas, 2 nays. The motion passes. Resolution 22 is adopted.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to our second opportunity for public comment. If anyone wishes to address the board on matters within our general jurisdiction, please do so now. Please identify yourself and provide us your address, and you have up to 3 minutes.
All right, let me sharpen my tongue real quick. It's about to get nasty. Hello, I'm D. Jones. Happy Black History. It's really 365 days of Black History because Black History was stolen. We're on stolen land from Indians. I just want you guys to recognize that because I am woke and I am aware of that. But one thing I do want to say is that I like to invite the Kent County GOP to jump ahead esports competition. I have the Kent Dems going to be there. We're going to have electric vehicles. Consumers Energy is bringing their electric vehicles. And I like to see bipartisan support. Because usually in politics, it's the Republicans that are usually blocking legislation that benefits everyone, all people. Usually it is. It's always the Republicans stopping good legislation and not working bipartisanly with the Democrats to be able to get things done. And if you guys think I'm a liar, call me out on my lie. Once you guys can actually, speak about that. So I really like to see you guys work together because I have the Kent Dems going to be there at the East-West competition. And I'd like for you guys, both parties, to be able to say that we came to the hood, to an underserved community where there's a lot of violence, where there's a lack of opportunity, and we all stood there and we worked together and we spoke to constituents, because there's black people that probably like Republican Party and there's black people that like the Dems. And so I wanted to offer that opportunity so you guys couldn't say, oh, D. Jones is favoring the Dems, because D. Jones came here and asked the Kent County Board, and I would have walked to the GOP's office, but you guys don't have an office because you guys can't stick together, to be honest. So I just like to just be honest as I can and say, it's funny, but you guys know how honest it is. That's what I love about it. It's so brutally funny that it's so funny. And you guys' lack of being together is just, it's exploiting itself. And so you guys know about the cool, powerful things that I'm bringing to Kent County, to the DeVos's powerful billionaires and things like that. I like to see you guys come together and really come together and really work and speak to constituents and work together for the best of humanity, for society. Why aren't we the best county in the whole United States, equitably working together? Why aren't you guys doing that? It's because you guys don't care about people. You guys don't honestly care about people. You guys only care about supporting the rich people, making sure that they're just rich while you guys are still in power. But you guys can be in power and still have power and give back to people. You know that's actually possible. I've shown you guys that with my own initiatives. I've shown you guys that. Call me a liar for anything that I've said today, please, because I'm not lying. I've shown you guys and offered the same opportunity to every single person in the community, equally, equitably, and fair and just. And you guys seen the power of that. And this is going to be huge, bigger things that's going to happen. So I asked Kent County GOP, my number is 616-273-0773. Hit me up. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Steck, commissioners, staff, fellow citizens. Thank you, Commissioner Burrow, for that invocation. Appreciated that. Daniel Scott, longtime resident of the County of Kent. So the Ready by 5 millage, I guess it's also called from 0 to 5 years of age. I know there was some discussion Tuesday, I believe, and I understand there's going to be further discussion and voting. I would hope we could conclude that 0 means conception. Even as God's holy word, the Christian Bible declares, Psalm 139, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You have formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, yet being unformed, and in your book all my members or parts of my body are written. The days fashioned for me when as yet there was none of them. So in the eyes of Almighty Lord God, life begins at conception. And even now prenatal science is proving this over and over again. Viable life, significant life is being discovered at 10, 12 weeks. So why not, and I'm also for supporting needy families, including children, obviously. So give some of these funds to organizations that will support mothers, families, that otherwise might consider having their baby murdered in the womb. Now, they call it partial birth abortion, which gives them an excuse to grab the legs of the child at 9 months, pull it partially out of the birth canal, and then I can't find it. It's a scalpel. They thrust the scalpel in the back of the baby's head, suck out the brains, so the baby can come out the birth canal. Let's stop that. Let's stop that. With this millage. Thank you.
Anyone else? I see none. We will then move to our next item and call upon our administrator for a report.
Yes, just a few items for today. I did want to mention that we're getting very close to launching the Mobility Steering Committee. You'll recall that we were successful in obtaining a $350,000 grant from MDOT through the Grand Valley Metro Council. I think we're in the final week of interviews for the consultant and expect that this will go to the Metro Council Board for approval on March 7th with the first meeting of the Mobility Steering Committee happening later in March is the plan. We do have multi-sector representation, including 3 commissioners, as Chair Steck mentioned. Commissioner Coleman has agreed to serve, Commissioner Pakla, and also Chair Steck. So we're looking forward to launching that process. I should also mention that the rapid study is part of the scope of work, so that we're not going to create something separate or in conflict to that, but something that should complement that, because I think we know that the actual service area of the rapid, with some of the much discussed subsidy that would be required for a countywide system, probably would not happen. And so there is a need for other approaches to try to find affordable transportation that's available to as many of our county residents as possible. So that will, we're getting closer and closer to that lifting off the ground. Also, Kent County 2050, yesterday the group that's kind of leading that effort worked through 4 potential future scenarios. There is a website up now for that effort, and so we'll be sending that link to commissioners, and I hope you're able to stay informed with that and ask questions and participate as you're able. And let's see. I think that will do it for today. Yes, thank you.
All right. Move to the next item.
I'm sorry.
That
I
will
do
not
have
do it
one
for
more
today.
item. I have to mention this. So just wanted to congratulate the board, the staff, especially Fiscal Services, for the 24th year. So we first got this in 2001, but we did achieve the Government Finance Officers Association Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 24th straight year. This is considered to be the highest form of recognition in the area of government accounting and financial reporting that we can achieve. And so kudos to everyone. Jeff, thank you, you and your team, for your hard work. But it really is a system. It means we have good governance, it means we have good management, and it means we have solid accounting and finance. So thank you.
And good governance, which means you all can take a bow.
Yes.
All right. Let's move to the next item, which is reports. Are there any reports from commissioners? Apparently, there are none. We'll move to miscellaneous. Is there any miscellaneous comment from commissioners? Commissioner Sparks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take a moment to pause. My cousin just recently passed, Dr. Rayanne Booker. A lot of you knew her in the community, the work that she stood for and has done with the colleges and Metro Health. So it's very sad, but we are very happy that she now does not have to suffer. She lived her last year suffering from ALS. So we're very thankful, but she's a wonderful person, just gone too soon. So I'd like to say thank you for everyone who's reached out about that. We have a very big family, the Richardsons and Flowers, so we're just very thankful for the community's support. The other thing is, I'd like to say thank you for those who have reached out to me to celebrate Black History Month. Black history is everybody's history, so I'm very thankful that there are people here who recognize the contributions that African Americans have made to our communities to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Commissioner Baker, you're? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just real quick, I was reluctant to say anything, but I just wanted Ray Ann Booker, Monica's cousin, was letting people know when people that have contributed to Community Pass, I think is important. It's nice to do that here, and there are many, many young people who are college grads today because of the work that she did, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thanks, Monica.
Anyone else? All right, I see none. I just have one comment. I believe the tour of the Crisis Stabilization Unit is scheduled for 10 o'clock or as soon as folks can arrive there, so. 11 o'clock. All right. 11, so you got plenty of time to get there. All right, if you are intending to go there and walk through the facility, that would be great. I think it'll be very illuminating for this new program that we are funding through our ARPA funds to a large extent. So I encourage you to do that. If there is nothing else, Commissioner Burrow already has his hands on the microphone. Do you have a last motion?
Thank you, Chair Steck. I move to adjourn, subject to the call of the chair, to Thursday, February 22nd, 2024 at 8:30 a.m. for an official meeting.
Supported. Thank you. We are adjourned.